All right, the recorded starting. So in this recording today, I am going to go over how to make artwork in the style of Purple House, and then also how to make transparent PNG images through Photoshop. So first off, for artwork in Purple House, it really starts with just a pencil sketch on white paper. That's your very first starting position. From there, you'll usually ink it. So you can use a regular ballpoint pen, or I like these. They're called micron pens. They're archival inks. But either way, first you pencil it, then you figure out exactly how you want to ink it. Sometimes you'll just follow whatever pencil sketch you've made, or sometimes you'll make more stylized choices as you go for the ink part of this. But that's part of how we get a consistent style with this one. So again, pencil first, then ink it. Make sure it's on clear paper, so it has to be white in the background. There shouldn't be any lines or anything on it. And then you can bring it into Photoshop or whatever editor you prefer. And then from here, let's say we're focusing on this pair of hands, right? I'm going to crop into that pair of hands. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Okay, we're at 100. All right, so from here, I'm going to double click the layer in order to unlock it. Okay. I am going to add a new layer. I'm going to drag that layer down. And then I'm going to make sure this layer is set to multiply. Okay, so those are kind of the important steps for trying. I would try to start coloring it first, whatever it is. So for example, if between now and next week, you want to practice this style by making your own weird plant, you could do that. But anyway, so I put all color in this bottom layer, or I'll put multiple layers down here of shading and color. But more or less, as long as I grab a brush, and let's say we're going to do yellow gloves for this, I can start to paint behind the lines. And it kind of makes like a watercolorish effect, especially if you turn down the opacity of the brush up here at the top. Let's say if we go like 20%, and let's say we do it like that instead of the full. So now this is at 20%, this is going to be lighter than this one, which is going to be darker. I might make like the insides of these a little bit more dark. There we go. Let's see, what else can we do? We can go right around there. Let's say this inside part could be a little bit darker. The gloves insides could also be a little bit darker. But this is how we get the watercolor style of Purple House, is really just brushes in different opacities. So 20 to 50%, so that we can use some shading. And we put it on a color layer underneath the main drawing layer, so that we can start working with it. If I have lots of harsh lines or something, because I don't like harsh lines for this, it likes to be more airbrushy, I might go to the top and I might blur the layer a little bit. So let me hide my floating media controls so I can see that. So I might go up to the very top where it says filter, and then blur, and then Gaussian blur. And then I might blur it just a little bit so that it is more airbrushed. And then I'd clean it up some with the eraser. So let me get the eraser and clean it up. Okay, and now what I can do is start to look at this and think, okay, I just want these gloves. I don't want that paper in the background. So this is when my transparent PNG comes in handy. So let me do that. What I'll do is I'll just simply make a mask. It's easiest if this is all one color, because then you can go up to select and then color range, and you can just select this outer area. Okay. And then that'll give you a pretty decent start. But being that this shape is a decent shape, I can try to use something else. I could try to use, let's go with the magnetic lasso tool. And I'm just going to go around. As long as there are defined edges, the magnetic lasso tool works pretty well for creating masks. I just have to go all the way around. And then the mask button is the very bottom right corner. It looks like a circle within a rectangle. And then I do that. And now I have a transparent PNG. And you notice this cut it up a little bit too much. So if my mask isn't as good as I like it, from here I can use the paintbrush. But as long as this mask is selected, one way we'll take back, one way we'll add. So for example, I'll push this back up to 100%. But anyway, so if I do this, that's going to subtract more. If I put white back on top with that arrow, I can bring stuff back. For example, there. Okay. So again, black as your paint base, mask selected, brings back, while white takes away. Sorry, it looks like white's bringing back while black is subtracting. You can double check your transparency when you're all done to make sure that, there's no weird artifacts or whatever. You can double check it down below. Usually what I'll do is I'll just create a fill layer and make it some sort of color that's opposite. And if I turn this on and off, I don't see any weird bits remaining. Oh, I see a little bit right here. So that means I have to go into the yellow and do some erasing. So right there. This is just a good check for anytime you have a transparency. And then I'll turn that back off and I'll go to File. And then this is one of the most important parts. As long as you export it as a PNG, it'll remain transparent in the background. Any other method of saving, except for maybe GIF, will destroy the transparent background and make it white. So I'm going to go for export as. It says gloves. See how that makes it white? We don't want that. I can see there's a little bit more that needs cleaned up right there, but I make it PNG. As long as it's PNG, it's now pretty much usable in whatever I want. So I'm going to say gloves. Where am I? I am in something. We're just going to put it in downloads for now. So then it's there, and then I can double check it over in downloads where I put it. And you can see, okay, obviously it looks like it needs cleaned up a little bit more around the edges. But that is more or less how we do art for Purple House, like any type of art that needs to be consistent with the theme. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, that's all good.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording here so that other people can view this later. Give me 1 sec.